Hello everyone and welcome to episode 54 of Podcast of Five Rings, your source of enlightenment in the realm of video games, tabletop, anime, film, and tech. Each episode of Podcast of Five Rings releases Monday mornings on iTunes and SoundCloud, and topic by topic, day by day on YouTube, with the full video releasing on Friday. Catch updates about the podcast or for other news, give us a follow on your social media platform of choice, listed in the description below. I'm your host, GM, and overseer of Podcast of Five Rings, Obsidian, joined tonight by the wall that will not fall, Tetsuo. Chirp, 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 chirp. The resident wildcard, Mao.
Woo, 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 woo.
In the Dark Fortune Duelist meta.
Hiya.
It's just you and me tonight. This is the first time ever.
First time ever, two-man podcast.
Yeah, we're going to see how this goes. I'm sure it'll go down in flames.
I prefer not to be on fire.
It's you and I, beset on each side, back to back, fighting as waves of Ronin rush over the hills. A crane and a lion stand.
Why are we fighting all these Ronins?
Trying to bring enlightenment to the Empire.
They just don't like our reviews. I don't understand why.
Yeah, because someone has to stand up to all this news that's coming out, right?
It is a lot of news.
Yeah.
I mean, we're 2 weeks away from E3. People are dropping things left and right, like it's candy or something.
Can't go use the bathroom and then something gets leaked.
I know.
I mean, it's not the only thing getting leaked in the bathroom. What?
Oh my god. I mean, you're not wrong though. Like, you go to the washroom. Hey, did you hear? They just leaked out a new character for this new game. It's like, wait, what?
Smash Bros. Roster revealed. What?
Mario jumps to the challenge.
Something. It's really a lot of stuff.
I do enjoy the Smash reveals, if only for the fact that they have to think of like clever ways to.
Yeah, they're always corny too.
They're always corny and clever. Like Greninja splashes into combat or something.
Yeah.
It was great. I love it. Oh.
I remember the one. What was the one most people freaked out for? It was either Mega Man or Sonic. I think where people like just lost their shit on the internet when he was revealed. I don't remember what they said.
It might have been Mega Man because they've started expanding out to like other games and other like series and kind of like what makes them classic or something.
I want Simon Belmont so bad.
I would love if they brought in a Castlevania character from Konami, but Konami doesn't like. I would take Alucard in a heart. I'd play the crap out of Alucard.
Yeah.
But I mean, Konami doesn't really like their game series anymore, so.
Yeah, that's true.
Pachinko and FIFA for days.
Exactly.
That's how they survive.
Oh my god.
Pachinko.
I mean, Pachinko is big in Japan.
It is. It makes some good dosh in Japan, but
all them salarymen playing Pachinko all night.
They got to do something to not go home to their wives.
Yeah, and then they go eat their ramen, and go back to work in 4 hours. The life of a salaryman.
I hear. So like, what you're saying is the Japanese are essentially elves. They only need to like meditate 2 hours to get like a full night's rest.
I mean, yeah. I guess if anyone's the elves of Earth, maybe it's the Japanese. They are like the mystic. There's the mystic Oriental Eastern thing going on.
It's probably what actually elves are likely had some inspiration from. If I had to gather a guess, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure either.
I'm not sure.
Who
I
knows?
could see it though. Very traditional setting, living long lives, having a lot of importance on showing a face and whatnot.
Yep.
Ancient elven techniques passed down from generation to generation. Glorious elven steel folded 1,000 times.
Exactly. Exactly.
Oh god, we went way off track.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get onto our topics here. Let's burn through this thing. Let's see how fast the two of us can plow through this episode.
All right. Speed mode on. Topic today: character generation. Go. It's like just name out.
I like rolling 3d6, and that's all you get down the sheet.
Yeah. Right.
Don't play a pally. What do you got? I got a 6, a 9, a 10, a 6, a 7, and 112. And I got my 12 in charisma, baby. It's Bard time.
Oh yeah, you're gonna go far in this game. Gonna diplomatize all my problems away.
Dat +1.
So, so obviously talking about character gen, and I kind of wanted to. Unfortunately, couldn't get Mao and Tets for this one, but
yeah,
that's okay. We didn't either opinions anyway. We're probably wrong.
Most assuredly.
Most assuredly, they were wrong about their thoughts and feelings.
Your opinion is wrong. Always remember that.
Always remember that. So, for the topic in of itself, for character generation is pretty much is mandatory for any tabletop role playing game. You have to have character. Because it's fairly certain that's a very important part of just making a role-playing character in general, so it's always there. But with so many games out, with so many systems out there, and less so so many systems, because there are a lot of systems that were just born or pulled from or heavily inspired by newer games that come out in RPGs. But you have like your generic, you have your D&D character generation, which also bleeds obviously into Pathfinder. You have Elphaba, a 13 ages or Age of 13 Winters or something like that. I can't remember. 13 Ages, I think is what it's called. I can't remember.
13th Age?
Yeah, 13th Age. Thank you. I could not remember the name of it.
You're close.
For the life of me. I was there. I was so close. You have tons of games out there like that utilize their own systems. You've got Fate, you've got Exalted, which has its own styling. And then obviously everything shares certain aspects. You have to have your main stats. You have to have your main thing. Vampire the Masquerade, in case we have like that one guy who's like, don't even say the best game.
Everyone's favorite White Wolf game.
You've got all those systems out there, and they have all their different ways of making the character generation and whatnot. But through the time of playing with these different character generations and whatnot, you obviously come to find things that you like about these character generations, and things that you're starting to sit there and go like, this was really stupid. And I'm not talking about like what comes after you've generated the character. When you find out like a class is broken or scales way better. I'm looking at you, Solarians, than like most other classes. I mean, you just have those kind of things. And I want to ask you specifically, what were some of the what are some of the character generations that you've liked? What are some things that you haven't liked about character generations? And what are some things that you would love to see put into character generators, depending obviously on what game may or may not have that feature? Like a feature that you might have saw in one game that you would like to see in other games, or certain different ways to change about it.
Well, not to beat a dead horse here, but I love Elphaba's character creation. Specifically, the thing I like, I mean, most of it's ho-hum, but the thing I like most about it, and some other games do this too, but I think I've seen Elphaba do it mostly the best. There are still issues with it, is advantages and disadvantages. The stuff that's there's more just balancing issues, like stuff is probably undercosted or overcosted. The points you get back, or so for those who aren't aware of what advantages and disadvantages in Elphaba are, when you build an Elphaba character, you get a certain amount of character points to generate a character with. Advantages cost character points. Disadvantages give you back character points up to 10 points. So, and they will be things like bad health, where you'll have less wounds, small, where you do less melee damage, or even things that kind of enforce your character in a way. And this is what I like the most about that aspect of character creation, is how you can use these. These are more than anything the skeleton of like who your character is, I suppose. And it's a really neat way to ingrain your character's story into the mechanics and like how you build the character's stats out and stuff, and getting XP back and stuff. There are some other games that do something like that. I think one of the Bot Wolf games does that. No, Shadowrun do it. No, Shadowrun doesn't do it. The Song of Ice and Fire RPG has it somewhat. It works a little bit differently, but they have like advantages, disadvantages. I'm sure there's a ton of games out there that have something similar.
They're probably, you're just going to get into games that are going to either have that kind of thing or not, and they might implement it in their own unique, special way or so, sure.
Yeah, so I like that a lot of, I mean, especially when it's so heavily ingrained into the story you're trying to tell, like it is with L5R.
Yeah.
What about you on that end?
I would actually have to say, probably my favorite character generation system. Oh, that's a fun to answer. So I'm not gonna answer it. Instead, I'm gonna go back into what you're talking about. Something I actually do like about, one thing I actually like about character generation, and this is gonna sound silly because we're gonna go back. We're both going to the same one. It's L5R. But I haven't really seen this elsewhere in other games as much, either because it's just not a part of how the game system works, or it's because that's not what's really focused on. I really like the fact that in L5R, your class, the class you play as, gives you a stat buff. It's not based on what your race is, which in L5R you're really only going to be one thing. But it's based on what your class is. So it's less about that, oh, you're playing an elf, you're going to get these bonuses and these penalties. But what if I'm an elf fighter who's been like, in the army and whatnot? Oh, you still have penalties.
No, you're
for,
still you're still a little stick guy.
And I mean, it's definitely one way to, see it as is like, well, your race isn't really going to change. Like your race is going to have probably a far bigger effect on you than what your job is. Like as compared to like another race, like a human or a half orc, let's say. Half orc is obviously just going to be sturdier, regardless if you're both a wizard or you're a fighter. It's just the way genetics work. And that from that perspective, that's true. But I like the idea that when you pick your class is also giving you a bonus. It's saying that because you took this job, your training, your way of life, the way that your schooling took you through, increased this trait about you. And I would like to see that in more games. It'd be really cool that if you're playing in like a tabletop game and you play like the kind of frailer character and then take up a class that's like, oh, they're a warrior or something, right? That'd be like, oh, because you took the warrior, you just gain a plus this stat, which might offset the penalty that race might have.
Yeah.
As opposed to enhancing a good stat on. And I would like that. I think that's just something that's very interesting, and I think it kind of goes along with the ideas that it kind of helps also create a better balance, which my thing is that you're sure, yes, genetically you can argue is that your character's always going to have these stats, but your way of life and how you live it can clearly change who you are and how things affect you. So it's just as much as how you are born and how you live that can define what your character becomes, and I like that idea a lot.
Yeah, and it totally makes sense for Elphaba because you're basically from the age of like 5 or 6, schooled in like this style of whatever you're doing that focuses on this like stat basically that you have. Yeah. So like Matsu are all about strength. That's like their fighting style. So of course, if you trained in the Matsu school and you've achieved your Genpaku, you've been trained as a Matsu for like 10 years, you're stronger than the average person. So yeah, I agree with you. I like that a lot.
I really like that. It's just a shame I don't think I've seen any other game do that, and that kind of sucks.
Yeah.
I will say Starfinder did something kind of similar to it.
Yeah, they did a little bit.
It was with the themes, though. And, I mean, the themes are limited, unfortunately. You've got, like, maybe 7 or 8 themes, and then you've got, like, the free theme to pull from.
Yeah, they kind of do, like, almost... They have, like, the same progression track, almost, it feels like to me. At least early on. I didn't get to mess around with higher level stuff.
Yeah, but I mean, when you take up your theme, you get like the +1 to a specific stat.
Exactly.
Of that theme might cover, and I like that. That means it kind of takes into account, and even the new version of Elphaba done by FFG, you kind of do that when you're creating your character. Certain things about how you choose to live your life through your character, like the 20 questions.
I thought that was the coolest thing about the new RPG.
Yes, that was honestly the best.
I was
thing
like,
about
I just want to build characters in this, honestly, because. Answering 20 questions is really fun because you have to do it to make your character.
Yeah, it's actually a really good system, and I want to see more games do something like that.
Yeah, I think they succeeded on what they were trying to do in that aspect.
I do too.
We've had that discussion.
We have had that discussion. I only wish that they added even more to it, like even more of those, because some of the choices unfortunately didn't really did anything. I wish almost every choice had like an effect on something. That would have been awesome.
Yeah, it would have.
But what about a system that you don't like in something? What is something in character gen you have seen that you're like, this could definitely go away, or doesn't, or not even go away, but something that you feel like wouldn't even do well in any other system?
So, okay, one thing, maybe people would probably disagree with me on this, but I do not like the Warhammer games. I don't know who made them. I can't believe I can't remember, but there was like Dark Heresy, Warhammer Fantasy, Rogue Trader, the percentile based games. A lot of your character, like you don't really get to play a character. I mean, you could, I guess, if your GM like found out a way to do it and let you, but you don't really get to. Or at least both 3 times I've made a character for it. You don't get to choose like what your character is or what he or she necessarily does. You roll everything randomly, which is kind of insane. And there's a lot of stuff. You make like 30 rolls. You roll like, I believe you roll all your stats randomly. You roll what class you are. In Warhammer Fantasy specifically, like you're basically almost guaranteed to start as a schmuck. Like you're going to be like a charcoal maker, a fireman, a rat catcher, a grave digger, and they'll give you cool stuff like a plus 5 percentile to like not become poisoned if you're like a rat catcher because you deal with rats all the time. But if you get lucky, you might get like I'm a bridge guard guy, or I'm like a soldier, and then you can eventually, from there, you get to choose what you want to do later on, because you start spending your XP to increase certain stats that you have, and they're basically like tiers of classes, and you basically like build up prerequisites to get into the class you want. But it sucks at the beginning of the game, and you might want to be like, I want to play this charming swashbuckling rogue guy, or I want to be this like ugly like sorcerer dude or something like that, and depending on what you roll, you might not get to do that. You could be like Mr. Charismatic and stuff, but it's just like you're ugly, you have no nose, your breath stinks, like people don't like you. You'll just roll it randomly. Everyone rolls like a weird quirk, and it's funny for like one shots, but I like playing campaigns more than one shots, and I would never want to play a campaign of that unless I rolled something really good. So that's something I've seen. Well, like always, well, I love randomness in D&D when it's moderated, like rolling stats and stuff. It's just a little bit of randomness, not when the whole thing is random.
Yeah, that would probably be a little off-putting. Plus, that's a lot of bloody rolls to start a game off. 30 rolls before you've even started the game?
Yeah, it's something like that. It might not be that many, but it's at least 15 or 20.
It's probably a little bit hyperbolic, but
yeah.
I mean, but the point is that if you're making an assload of rolls for stuff, if you're going probably past, I would argue, if you're probably going past 10 rolls for different things, not even just your stats. If you're just starting to go into rolling into everything, like a lot of things in your in your character gen, you're probably rolling too much, because that tells me that there's a lot of things that are not to choice.
Yep,
it's a lot of things to RNG.
Yeah, and your whole basically most of your character's backstory is going to be shaped by what you randomly roll. So
I'm not sure I'd be a fan of that, because I actually like to write up my backstory and then create a character around that backstory, create a character, and then make a backstory for that character.
Yeah.
I don't care for too much RNG. I actually, even to be truthfully told, I tend to avoid even things like heritage tables and whatnot.
Yeah.
I just
don't
like them.
The heritage tables.
I think it's not that it's a bad thing. I just don't like them, because on the off chance you could screw your character over by accidentally getting something bad. Like, oh, you rolled this, one of your traits is lowered. Oh, thanks, RNG. I really wanted to get fucked.
See, that's what I like about heritage tables, though, is that they're optional. You get to choose whether you
get to choose. Yeah,
it's the risk or the reward.
Yeah, so you at least choose that kind of stuff. But if it's forced to, that always kind of kills it for me personally.
Yeah.
One thing I personally would like to see go away in tabletop games in general, and it's going to be your gives and takes here. And I know it's kind of hard to say, but I actually don't care a lot of the times for disadvantage systems or like penalty systems for a bonus. Generally, they're almost always min-maxed, regardless of who you're playing.
So give an example real quick of one specifically.
Well, the easiest one to give would be L5R, but I'm actually going to not do that one. I'm going to go to Dungeons & Dragons 3.5. And I know some people are like, but that's 3.5. And I'm like, I know, I understand, but you have to understand, it doesn't seem to really matter what system it is in. People will min-max the shit out of their disadvantages. Dungeons & Dragons 3.5, they implemented it very later on, or it might have been from 3.0 years and then the 3.5, but a lot of stuff in 3.0 and 3.5 were interminglable. You just could update it if you needed to for 3.5. So really anything 3.0 was also technically 3.5. So with that out of the way, they did implement what was called flaws or character flaws, and they would essentially give a pretty decent penalty to the character for something. But then you might get a bonus in turn of it, like frail but nimble. Like your character was a little bit frailer, so they get a -2 to their con, but they get +1 to their initiative. Believe it or not.
Oh, gotcha.
That
Yeah, I
kind of
can
stuff,
see how that.
Yeah. It didn't really matter. Like if you were playing, and I know this is like the extreme of the example, but we were playing. We had a campaign quite literally where it was like, oh, we're playing evil characters, and some of us were undead. Guess what flaw was taken by everybody?
What flaw is that, Meta?
Frail but nimble.
Okay,
everybody took the -2 Constitution because undead don't use Constitution. They don't have it. They're undead. So it didn't matter. They took it and they got a +1 initiative for nothing. Mm-hmm. Now that's the extreme, but I even saw it on living characters. They just didn't have a reason to do it because their other gimmicks that they started to do was they started to min-max around smaller things. Like, oh, I'll just take this, but then I'll min-max this. So Constitution doesn't really matter anyway for my character. Yeah. Or they might have been a character that's not really going to be in the middle of a fray and taking hits, so their Constitution doesn't really matter anyway. That kind of stuff, and you'll see that kind of thing. And like that's just an example of like one of the flaws, but that was the point I'm making. And then in L5R, you see it all the time. Like you'll see Driven taken a lot, and not actually pushed.
That's when I say it's not balanced.
Yeah, and then you say something like, or like Doubt, for instance.
Doubt is the worst.
Doubt on the skill that I will never use. I've seen this.
I tried to sneak Doubt Theology past the GM once. He was like, Doubt Theology? Really? I was playing like a Dragon Bushi, and he was like, I was like, I don't know. Who am I? I don't know where I am.
I've seen, what is it?
He's like,
Doubt Kyujutsu for Kakita duelists and whatnot.
It's like,
I'm
you're
like,
never
what?
Gonna use that.
You're never going to use that anyway. Well, of course why would you? Of course you're going to take Doubt on.
Doubt needs to be like, pick your highest ranked skill.
Well, I think not to go too off track on it, but even then, Doubt was just not worth the point for the loss that it gave you.
Yeah,
you got essentially a -5. You had to make a call a raise for nothing, which means
worse than a -5.
Yeah, it's worse than a -5 because not only did it add technically a +5 to your TM, but it took one of your raises away whenever you use that skill.
Yeah,
it's bullshit. That's not worth the 3 EXP you're giving me for it. So of course people use it. So
no one will ever take this for 8 points. You can never use Void.
Oh, no. Yeah.
You better give me like 30 points.
It didn't even give you 10 points. It doesn't even cap you for it. It's just like you still have to take another disadvantage to cap out.
Yeah. Oh my god.
No, but like barring the poor balance, people always like bounced around that kind of thing. And like one of the ones was like Touch of the Void, where anytime you use the Void point, you would get to keep one.
Yeah.
But you had to make a will. Yeah, you had to make a will roll. Well, and some people, I remember when we actually had this issue. We had some people taking it, but they weren't making the days roll first. And yes, you have to make the days roll first, which means that if you fail that roll, you immediately take a -3 keep 0 to the roll. And a -3 keep 0 is far worse, outweighs the benefit of a 2 keep 1 on a void point usage. It does. You're dazed for the whole round. Plus, it had other penalties to it that might have affected you in combat as well. And I mean, eventually, if you got into higher levels and a high enough will, then it becomes a boon as opposed to a disadvantage, which I'd actually say is kind of ironic, really. And it makes it kind of nice to know that eventually it won't be as big of a problem later on. But you'll see people take that, but once they realize that, like, oh, this game won't go that far, and I'm just screwing myself over, they immediately stop using it or even want to trade it out for something else.
Yeah.
And then there's other disadvantages out there you can probably just
Bushi never takes small, courtiers never take large.
No.
Like stuff like that.
You never take those stuff. You never take what was it? You would never take a permanent wound if you're a Bushi.
Yeah.
It's a horrible idea. Especially already considering how lethal the game is. I
played a game where I took it and bad health.
Oh my god!
And was Bushi.
And you're a brave soul.
Yeah. That was a courtly focused game, so
I
was being a cheeseball, but still.
I've also seen like even some of the ones that are beneficial, that are supposed to be beneficial, are not actually worth it. Like, and this is even going outside of disadvantages. But like the idea is that like you would take this one talent, or not this one talent, this one advantage, and what it would do is it's supposed to give you a like your anytime you buy any stat within this ring, it costs one last, but the advantage costs like 5 or 6 points.
Yeah, so you have to buy it like a
you have to buy that stat 7 times before it finally benefits you. And I'm like, this game's kind of stupid because it only reduces it by 1, the cost by 1. So there's nothing like that. So people will even avoid advantages like that to help better min-max. So they'll take up the disadvantages that are easy to argue, or there's really no strong line about them, which is hard to deal with in like a big play-by-post game, but far easier to manage in a small game, because then you can say somebody's like, you need to sit down and just be like with them as a GM, and you can sit down and say like, look, you're taking this advantage. I'm telling you, this is exactly how I'm going to run this advantage in this game. If you don't want that, if you don't want this to potentially happen to your character, do not take this disadvantage, because I will hound you like a dog. You have to, because otherwise it's driven as like a 2 free points otherwise.
Yep.
So, but I see that, and I really kind of want to see this going away. I feel like if you're gonna roleplay a flaw to your character, just roleplay the flaw. Don't bother with a disadvantage system that's going to give you points or some way to give you another bonus and something. Just get rid of all that, because people are going to min-max the crap out of it, because nobody really wants to take on a disadvantage for the sake of a disadvantage. Now, does the disadvantage sometimes play nice with your backstory? Absolutely. There's definitely examples out there where I've seen players who take a disadvantage that works perfectly with them. But generally, that's because the disadvantage not only is nicely balanced and worthwhile the cost to the penalty, but it fits the character that they're making, which unfortunately is not the norm. And again, that's just another reason why I think they should be gone. If you're gonna make a flaw about your character, make that flaw for your character and roleplay that, and then just take away the bonuses that they would get from it. If you played a game of Elphaba without the disadvantages, I think it would change. It would mean that people are no longer going to be worrying about trying to min-max their disadvantage for points, which, I mean, not to say that everybody's min-maxing, but here I go. Everybody's min-maxing.
Everybody tries to get to 10.
Everybody's going to try to get to 10. I've seen very few games where they don't. Actually, I have to admit, my own home game, I did have one character who didn't. I think I have 1 or 2 characters who did not, who only took like 1 or 2 disadvantages, and that was it.
Sometimes you can't think of any that makes sense for your character.
Yeah, well, but again, as I pointed out earlier on, I said like, but in a home game, I can really hound on somebody and go like, you take that disadvantage. This is what's going to happen, buddy. This is how I'm going to run it, because I'm harsh about the disadvantages. At least the easy ones. The ones that are like doubt and whatnot, I would actually probably nerf those a bit. They're really too good in certain ways.
We have like retool point costs and stuff, and some are just banned. I make luck 5 points, and you can only buy it once.
I can totally understand that, because luck is really good.
It's stupid, and everyone always gets multiple ranks in it.
Then the other problem, though, I mean, at least for the game in and of itself, is that like luck in that game sometimes feels mandatory, because you can get so screwed over at a task you should be otherwise.
Test of honor, you better be honorable. Just saying.
So, but it just happens. You just end up having people take any type of disadvantage, any type of flaw, any type of downside, and they're going to maximize the output of it. If you're not able to pay attention to them when they do it, which is why generally a big help for the game comes into play is that like you could remodify them, you can talk to your GM before you go into the game, and like understand how things are going to be done and whatnot. But you shouldn't always have to do that, and that's the last big thing here, is that if I'm picking up a game and I'm trying to get new people into the game, especially a game that might be as lore heavy as Elphaba, or even generally a very easy, very neutral toned setting game like Pathfinder or Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
I shouldn't have to try to go over with my players their disadvantages, go like, okay, why do you have this disadvantage? I don't know, this disadvantage is too good, or that doesn't make any sense. I'm going to have to ask you to do it, or just flat out say, like, no, you can't do this flaw because it's very broken, and I do not want that in my game. Or I have to sit down and tell them, I know you want to make this kind of character with this kind of flaw, but I'm going to have to do this if you do that. I shouldn't have, no GM should have to do that, especially to a new player. I've actually had that experience. A new player wanted to play, and the first game was running of Elphaba with a couple of friends, and they wanted to play this type of character that was secretly a female and whatnot, as opposed to a male.
Yeah.
And I had to kind of explain to them, like, first off, well, technically females don't really need to hide themselves in the society at all. I said,
it's more egalitarian.
Yeah, I was gonna say, but you can create like a reason as to why they're doing it. That's fine. But then they wanted to take like dark secret something, and I'm like, this game isn't really gonna cover that, so I can't really give it to you.
Yeah. But
And
yeah,
then
there's times you just have to be honest as a GM.
yeah, and it's kind of like, well, and then kind of like, well, my idea doesn't really work, and then they just ended up not joining the game, and it may have been because of like all the no's I was giving them, which is something that kind of sucks because when you tell a new player no a number of times, they start to feel like their options are limited. It just happens. So nobody should have to go into a game like that. And when you're already seeing disadvantages get utilized as ways to benefit a player, and when you have to kind of go into the game and look every like flaw over and ask why and tell the player why they can't do this or tell the player this is how it's going to be run, which makes them have to rethink if they want it or not, which if they're already rethinking if they want it or not, that tells you that they weren't really taking it because that's a flaw for their character. It's because they felt that was going to be run. It was going to be run in a way that wouldn't be too mean to their character, or at least as they see it, they perceive it, which is different for everybody. But that is something I want to see.
Yeah, no, I can see your argument there. So what's your favorite system to build characters in, that being said, I guess?
Oh, favorite system? I got to admit, it's not the best, and I think it could use some touch-ups, but I have to actually say I really enjoy the crap out of Starfinder.
Yeah.
I like the idea is that you can either follow and I'm going to go by base default for the system, mind you. I'm going to go by base default because you obviously have the optional ways of either rolling or taking a stat set on whatnot. But the base default of the way the game works is that you start at 10 just raw across the board. Then from there, you pick your race. And your race will give stat bonuses and stat penalties, and you change your modifiers from there. So you might get, like, let's say you're making an android in Starfinder. They give you a +2 dex, a +2 intelligence, but a -2 to charisma. Okay, fine. So then you change it on your character sheet, and you go from like 10 to 12, 10 to 12, and then 10 to 8. And there you go. So now you're going to start. Then you have to choose a theme. And it's like, well, what kind of theme are you going to be playing? Actually, I'm sorry. You would choose your class next, which would give you your stamina points, plus your con modifier, as well as the health for the class itself. So then you choose that, and then you're like, okay, well, after that, then you choose your theme. And then your theme is like, well, this is the kind of class I'm going to play, and this is kind of the race that I am, so what theme would I feel is appropriate for my character? And you might go through the few themes, and you'll notice that, like, in those themes, they kind of give you some bonuses and whatnot that come level up. They're nothing big, and in fact, some are, I would argue, generally way worse than some of the other ones. They could probably use some rebalancing, but take that for what it is. And then the most important part is that, at least for stat-wise anyway, is that they also add a +1 to one of your ability modifiers, whether it be strength, dex, con, whatever. So then you choose the theme that you feel is most appropriate for your character and the kind of character you want to play, and you add like a +1 to that stat. And then from there, you are then given 10 stat points to just spend, and everything's a 1-to-1 ratio. If you raise your stat by 1 point, it costs you 1. If you raise your stat by 2 points, it costs 2 points.
Yeah, and you have like the highest you can get to is like 14, isn't it, or is it 15?
It caps out at 18. You cap on character creation on it, and this is another thing I actually like as well. Is your character creation is capped out at 18. You cannot go above. So this is something I actually really, really enjoy. It gives you a lot more freedom to start off without feeling too limited. But at the same time, when I went through it, I also felt sort of limited. And I think that's going to, and as silly as it sounds, I know I contradicted myself there, but on one hand, I wasn't able to, it's a little bit hard. You're still kind of stuck with a character that can't really break the mold. And that's generally going to fall onto your race, kind of affecting that more than anything else. Because whatever race you take up is generally going to potentially, except for humans, because humans are always amazing in Pathfinder and whatnot, or any Dungeons and Dragons game, they're always just good. The other races will generally give a +2, a +2, and a -2, or a +2 and a -2, or maybe just a +2 of some random thing. And generally that means you're going to get either a 6 swing, a 4 swing, or possibly a 2 swing just from the start. So your race can still kind of screw you over, but as long as it's got a low reason for it. But the 10 points specifically is what I really like, is the fact that you can kind of help customize. You can either offset a weakness, you can build into something that you really want to do. The only downside is that I just feel like there needs to be more themes and more archetypes and more races, because that really starts to open up the road, or even like new versions of races. Like Android
Variant
version
races or whatever.
2. Yeah, like variations on those variant races would be perfect. I think this would be really cool to do as well. So it'd give you some more choice to play the race you want and maybe a variant of it. But I do enjoy the fact that you get a lot of freedom to just kind of put your points where you want to, which is actually probably most akin to how video games do it. Like when you're creating your character in Fallout or something, you choose your stats in that, and you choose like you get like 6 stat points, and I'm gonna put 2 into strength, and I'm gonna take 3 out of intelligence, and I'm gonna put 3 into con. And I'm gonna be a big, dumb, strong guy, and that's how you're gonna play your game. And I like that it kind of falls into that category, while being able to add on different items to be statting it out and what. So that's actually probably my favorite character generation I've had. Plus, I just like techie stuff, so.
You just want to build ships. That's all it is.
I just want to build
you
ships.
I just want to sit down for like 3 hours and build ships.
I know we will. One of these days.
I really like 5th edition D&D, actually.
Really?
It's for building characters. There's just a lot of characters I want to make in that game that I haven't got to play yet. My favorite I've made so far, I think, is we played like a level 4 or 5 one-shot. I made a warlock who was the blade lock. I can't remember the name of it. Not with the pack blade, but with where he gets his power from the weapon. It's in Xanthar's God.
The Hexblade?
Hexblade, yes, and Samurai. So it was such a cool. I love this character concept that basically like his grandfather's soul was like killed by a demon and put into his katana, and it became basically like a tainted sword. And his grandfather's soul is the one that gave him his like warlock powers. It's like cursed by this Oni, basically. And he like runs around with like a warlock blade and stuff and fires off Getsuga Tenshos. Because I had my Eldritch Blast be like sword beams, basically.
That is very thematic.
Yeah, and basically like his backstory was that his whole like people got overrun by like a tiefling empire that were like descended from Onis and stuff like that.
Damn.
Yeah, so it was pretty. There's just so many characters I want to play in 5th edition D&D. And there's lots of options. There's like tons of backgrounds you can pick from now. Lots of classes. Well, it's the same like base classes, but lots of basically paths to branch off into. And I don't know. I love 5th edition D&D so much. So
it's a good system. It is a good system.
It's my favorite D&D system by far.
I like how our favorite systems are not Elphaba.
Yeah, well, it has problems.
It has Elphaba. I love Elphaba. I hate
talked
Elphaba.
about those. Yeah,
it's a very love-hate.
I'm more in a love relationship with Elphaba than your love-hate, but
I have a love-hate with it. I really do.
but hey, I'm not gonna begrudge you.
I thank you, Obs. I appreciate it.
This isn't that kind of show.
I'm sure there's somebody out there who's like, I hate this guy.
The next week on Podcast of 5 Rings, we just shit on each other's opinions. We get sick of each other real quick.
Oh, yes, we would.